The smarter you are, the more successful you'll be, right? After all, the most successful people in the world have high intelligence quotients, known as IQs. But is a person's IQ really the most important factor of their success? Let's take a look at some of the most successful and intelligent people on the planet, like this man, and find out. Before I tell you about the most intelligent person in the world and what he's doing with his amazing gift, let's find out the science behind intelligence and success. One of the most well-known psychologists who studied intelligence in children, attempting to decode how a person's success can be predicted by their IQ as a child, was Lewis Terman. He set out to show that IQ was of central importance to achievement and attainment. In the early part of the 20th century, after testing a group of children that were considered intelligent by their teachers, Terman assembled a group of 856 boys and 672 girls with an average IQ of 151. To put that into perspective, an IQ over about 140 is considered genius level. 35 years later, he would check in with a group known as termites, hoping to find out that they would be policymakers, Nobel laureates, famous professors, or great artists. Indeed, the success levels achieved by his group of pupils far exceeded the average person. As a group, they had written almost 2,000 scientific papers, 60 books in various fields of science, literature, and the arts, had submitted hundreds of patents, and written many novels, just to name a few of the achievements made by the group. These results have even been backed up by recent studies. After following the accomplishments of 2,000 people who scored in the top 1% on SAT tests by the time that they were 13 years old, psychologists of Vanderbilt University found that those who were in the top 0.1% with an IQ of 146 or higher were 3 to 5 times more likely to earn a doctorate, secure a patent, or publish an article in a scientific journal or literary work than those in the top 0.9% who have an IQ of 134 or above. So again, being super smart seems to take you further in life. And it isn't hard to find real-world examples as evidence. For example, Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein both had an IQ of 160, achieved by only 0.003% of the world's population. That's the same IQ score held by notable celebrities like Conan O'Brien, Quentin Tarantino, Matt Damon, and Ashton Kutcher, just to name a few. That's all very impressive, but it doesn't explain why many non-genius individuals have achieved just as much success despite having much lower IQs. Smooth and fast-talking boxer Muhammad Ali had an IQ of 78, but you would have never known it based on the way he studied his opponents and ranted eloquently to express his superiority. In fact, only one president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, had an IQ higher than 160. George Bush, for example, is estimated to have an IQ of 125. Even Ronald Reagan, who was voted as the greatest American of all time in 2005, only had an IQ of 130. So if intelligence is so important, then how did so many non-geniuses get elected to the most important job in the country? Clearly, there's more to it than meets the eye. Turns out, Terman's initial study and many following ones have been flawed by experimental and selection biases and ignore many important factors. The studies also don't explain why his termites didn't come close in caliber to the scientific elite of the same nation and era. True, the termites' accomplishments are undoubtedly impressive, but lots of other people with lower IQs have achieved much more. One example of a person who was discarded from the test was William Shockley, a very bright individual who tested for Terman's study, but didn't make the cut because his IQ wasn't high enough to be considered a termite. Shockley was no slouch academically though, as he attended Harvard University, got his PhD, and eventually became a professor at Stanford University. He even earned a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1970. None of the termites ever received a Nobel Prize. In fact, on average, the academic termites in the study had created 29 publications by the time that they had reached their mid-40s. But American Nobel laureates achieved 38 before the age of 40 in the same era of time. So how did Shockley, a reject from the study, become more successful than the termites who were supposed to outdo everyone else? The answer is clear. He and other successful non-geniuses each succeeded based on a series of opportunities and circumstances that were afforded to them, as well as a serious amount of hard work they dedicated to their craft. William Shockley, as intelligent as he was raised in such a way that made him put in the hard work to accomplish more than those from the termite group he was rejected from. To prove this point, let's discover why some of the smartest people in the world aren't as successful, and why that's the case. Meet Christopher Michael Langan. In every respect, Mr. Langan appears to be a common individual, except for one thing, his IQ. While the average person's IQ is right around the 100 mark, Mr. Langan's IQ sits close to 200. This has given him the distinction of being called the smartest human on Earth. Langan surely would have been considered a termite, but his success isn't driven in a way that Terman would have predicted. Let's find out what that incredibly high IQ has achieved for him. Born in San Francisco, California in 1952, Langan spent much of his childhood in Montana, raised by his mother, Mary, and his stepfather, Jack Langan. His family didn't have much and often lived on violent native reservation lands, but Langan did show early signs of heightened intelligence during his childhood. He was skipped ahead through elementary school, and as he progressed through high school, his teacher wouldn't give him any more advanced materials. This led him to teaching himself advanced math, physics, philosophy, Latin, and Greek. While he attended Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and later Montana State University, he soon dropped out as he faced issues dealing with his university and felt he could teach his professors more than they could teach him. You'd think that with such a brilliant mind, Langan's career would lead him to change the world in some fantastic ways. By the time he was in his mid-40s, though, Langan had worked several jobs, from being a construction worker, cowboy, forest service ranger, farmhand, and even a bouncer for over 20 years on Long Island, New York. That's a very average career path indeed. According to Langan himself, he lived a double life. During the day, he was an average guy working an average job, but at night, he would quietly work on mathematical equations in his head, while also developing his theory on the relationship between the mind and reality, which he called the cognitive theoretic model of the universe. It examines how the mind perceives its surroundings and takes into account concepts from the Big Bang to God and everything in between. Langan currently resides on a 130-acre farm in Missouri with his wife Gina, caring for a few animals and continuing his self-study. He considers this lifestyle more meaningful than becoming rich and famous or being a politician. While intelligence is important to him, success, as the average person would describe it, is of no concern. Mr. Langan is a prime example of how the link between intelligence and success is not as solid as Terman and other studies suggest. In fact, the popular notion linking natural talent to success is wrong, according to journalist and author Malcolm Gladwell, as written in his book Outliers. A more accurate model of success is dependent on numerous factors, as you're about to find out. Gladwell compares Chris Langan's story to that of Robert Oppenheimer, the well-known physicist who led an Allied effort to create the atomic bomb in World War II. Both demonstrate an extraordinary mind, but it was applied in different ways. Oppenheimer demonstrated more sheer will and determination to achieve what he wanted. Langan's approach to success is the exact opposite, as he accepts what he's become and has no desire to push for more. Langan had a tendency to quit, while Oppenheimer persevered in the face of extreme challenges and learned the necessary skills that became vitally important to achieving his success. This comparison displays the need for hard work over intelligence as a major factor in success. Where one person is unwilling to do what's necessary to achieve greatness, another will strive to be the best and never stop until that's accomplished. So clearly, hard work and a variety of other factors are just as important as intelligence, but hard work itself isn't a self-contained attribute afforded simply because of the decisions and efforts we make on our own behalf. Langan's story was influenced by many external forces outside of his control, like his poor upbringing which shaped his path. You see, some families, typically from wealthier backgrounds, empower their children to stand up and expect better. More often than not, poorer families accept conditions and limitations others impose on them, which serves to suffocate and stifle them in the long term. For example, Langan was kicked out of school for forgetting to file a form because he couldn't talk his way out of it, whilst Oppenheimer, from a well-off family, managed to convince his university to just put him on probation after he attempted to poison his tutor. In other words, the potential murderer got off lighter, due to his innate ability unrelated to intelligence. Oppenheimer was also the son of garment workers, who taught him the values of meaningful work and the relationship between complexity, autonomy, and the relationship between effort and reward. Had Langan been brought up differently, his social skills and mentality surely would have enabled him to achieve greatness on the level or beyond that of Einstein. But if we go deeper, you'll see that real success is even more complicated because it depends on developing talents, which requires practice and timing. Because only some talents foster great success at certain times. This last component is largely based on luck. For example, the real pioneers of our world, like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, were extremely lucky in their timing. Gates, for example, was lucky enough to be enrolled at a private school with programming classes, despite the fact that most universities didn't have computers like the one he was able to practice on at age 13. Steve Jobs, on the other hand, lived in what's now considered Silicon Valley, and even snagged a job with HP after its CEO agreed to give him spare parts. Turns out, they both racked up about 10,000 hours of practice, the perfect amount to be considered an expert. Just at the right time before the computer boom, which enabled them to be old enough to start their own venture without the constraints of a family and job. The timing of them becoming experts in their field couldn't have been more perfect. and it's proven by their date of birth, as they were both born in 1955. So in the end, success is more accurately due to a strange cocktail of hard work, intelligence, and the right circumstances. Still, how important is intelligence? Well, while a high IQ will help you solve puzzles, without a hard-working mentality, which is fostered as a result of your upbringing, you'll achieve nothing. Working hard means very focused and consistent work, leaving all distractions aside and concentrating for extended periods to achieve your goals over a long period of time. This practice takes patience and perseverance. So, generally, it's a combination of intelligence and hard work that achieves success. A high IQ does correspond to higher achievement, but there's a threshold. Once a person's IQ reaches above 120, further intelligence points are meaningless. So, as long as you're working hard, you can achieve greatness with a reasonable IQ level. Not only that, IQ tests don't measure a person's creativity or their ability to shift gears intellectually with ease and dexterity. Just because someone has a high IQ doesn't mean they have other kinds of intelligence. This is one reason that someone with an IQ of 125 is just as likely to win a Nobel Prize as someone with an IQ of 185, because other kinds of intelligence matter. Creativity is a huge, overlooked factor in determining success, as it enables us to think outside the box and do things in different ways that leads to success. For example, famous pop artist Andy Warhol had an IQ of 86, yet he's one of the most successful artists of the modern era. There are even cases of people with Down syndrome making a positive impact on the world, despite the average IQ of someone with the disability being 50. Pablo Pineda, for example, is a notable writer, speaker, and actor with a disorder. And Tim Harris ran a successful restaurant in Albuquerque despite his low IQ level. So if you take something away from this video, it should be this. As long as you've got a few more brain cells than Wile E. Coyote, you can still be successful. Intelligence is a good starting point, but applying just as much creativity and hard work as Wile E. Coyote does make all the difference. Smart thinking and working hard, no matter what your IQ level, will always be better than thinking you're smart and hardly working. So, has this information changed your outlook, or would you prefer a peaceful life like Langan, instead of achieving what society might regard as successful? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and thanks for watching.